Now let's talk about confidence intervals, reporting results, and actually we'll probably wrap up with a little bit of test review. So a short review on some things. Correlations will vary between -1 and +1. 0 equals no relationship. Remember we had the effect size chart earlier? Correlations are effect sizes. So you don't have to figure out the effect size for a correlation value that is the effect size in the population. So if the correlation coefficient is 0.1, it's a small effect, 0.3 is a medium effect, 0.5 is a large effect. Remember we've looked at a correlation coefficient that was 0.41 several times throughout this PowerPoint. And so 0.41, and I know that's going to come up again here in a minute, is somewhere between a medium and a large effect. It's just that easy. There's also a coefficient of determination, which is r squared. So if you square the value of r, say the 0.41, if you squared 0.41 and said 0.41 times 0.41, you'd get the part of the variance in one variable that is shared by another. So I can't remember exactly which two variables we used. Let's just say we used perceptions of food safety, FSP, and food consumption behavior, FCB. Those were the two that we did the correlation, we ran the correlation coefficient for. And let's say that the relationship between those two variables was 0.41. If you square 0.41, and I can't do that math in my head, but you can do it on your calculator right quick. If you square that number, that squared value is the part of variance in one variable that's shared by the other. So just think about it as one of those circle diagrams where the two circles overlap, and that overlapping part is where that shared variance piece goes. You can also create confidence intervals for Pearson's R. And I do have an online calculator that you can use for that. Let's go use that online calculator right quick and do these. We'll plug these numbers in and just see how it works. All right, so we're going to go to this website. We're going to do two examples. In the first example, we know that we collected 218 surveys, and we know that the relationship between the two variables was 0.41. So, relationship is 0.41, and we collected 218 surveys. So let's calculate our confidence interval. Our 0.95 confidence interval, which is what you would typically report, has a lower limit of 0.29 and an upper limit of 0.51. Here is something to note. If both numbers are positive in your confidence interval, or both numbers are negative in your confidence interval, even if you don't have anything else, you know that you have a significant relationship. So you can look at the confidence interval. If this is all you have is the R, the N, and this confidence interval, and you know that that 0.41 is a significant relationship. Now let's look at another example. Let's say you collected 216 surveys and your relationship between the two variables was 0.08. So the relationship is 0.08. You collected 216 surveys. Look at how that changed your 0.95 confidence interval. Now you've got negative 0.054 for your lower limit and 0.211 for your upper limit. Here's something to know when you look at this confidence interval. See how you've got a negative and a positive, and it crosses 0? Anytime your confidence interval crosses 0, you know immediately no significance in that correlation coefficient. So, some little tips to keep in mind. Even if they don't tell you what the p-value is, you don't need to know it because you have the confidence interval. All right, let's go back to our PowerPoint. Okay, so guess what? You can do that for yourself again in the on the website, and then you can see that I've written in here for you that when the confidence interval is either both positive numbers, and the same is true if both numbers are negative, it's going to be statistically significant. And if you've got a negative and a positive and you're obviously crossing 0, it's going to be not statistically significant. Now, I will share a little fact with you. Probably more information than you want to know, and this is not on the test, it's just for your information. So to know is that if you've got a negative and a positive that are both really close to 0, every now and then you will get very small level of significance. It may come out at 0.05, but your effect size is also not going to be very high either. So anyway, it crossed 0. I'm always going to call it not significant when 0 is in that confidence interval. So then you've done all of this work. It's time to report your results. And I just always boil it down to the bare minimum, right? When you're writing your master's thesis or your PhD dissertation, you've got to talk a whole lot more. If anyone in the group knows me, you know that what you hear me say in lecture is probably way more than you will ever see me write in a paper. I am a short, sweet, and to the point writer, even if I can talk for quite a bit of time sometimes when we're in the room together. That said, reporting results. What you see here on this screen is the absolute bare minimum of what you've got to report. You need to tell, is the relationship significant? There are several different ways that you can state that, and you see that significance is reported in the first 3 examples. And then you see in the 4th example that it clearly states there is no relationship. You have to report what your R value is. And the subscripts tell you what kind of R value it is. So I could tell you, but I'm not going to. I'm going to ask you to go back to the earlier slide where each of these notations is given. It's toward the beginning of the PowerPoint, and you tell me. You can write that out. It's not hard to find. All right, so you give your R value, you tell what your P value is, and you give a confidence interval. Now you'll see in these examples I didn't give the exact P value. As we go along, I will be giving P equals. In this case, I just said P was less than 0.001, and none of that is necessary if there's no relationship. You just say no relationship. All right, we're down to the last slide. I bet you thought we wouldn't get to here, but here we are, test review. I told you when we were going through the 2 power analysis slides how I might ask questions for the test. Excuse me, I'm not going to ask you to actually do a power analysis. I'm just going to ask you questions about those screenshot kinds of things. I might ask you, you've got these 2 kinds of variables. What's the correct correlation coefficient to use? So if I said, your variables are years of service and a construct mean score for intention to be more physically active. That's kind of a strange combination there, but don't overthink it. What kinds of variables are those? What kind of correlation coefficients should you use? That's the kind of question I might ask you in terms of selecting the correct correlation coefficient. Writing objectives. I am more likely to ask you to select the correctly written or the incorrectly written objective, But every now and then, I get excited and I say, just write me an objective. So do be prepared. You could have to write an objective. So think about variables from your studies, because I don't really want to see my objectives given back to me. I want to see you write new objectives that are based on your studies. So usually if I'm asking you to do that, I'm going to ask you to do a few things. I'm going to say, tell me about 2 variables in your study, and you'll have to name them. And you'll have to tell me what kind of variables they are, dichotomous, ordinal, or continuous. And then you'll have to write the objective. Using SPSS, so you could be asked to do some analysis for the test. It's more likely that I will give you output and ask you to read the output and tell me what it's telling you. But I'm going to reserve the right to also give you a problem and say, now go to SPSS and figure this out. And then you'll have to come back and give me the answer on the exam. Reading and interpreting output, just like we talked about a little earlier. Defining a confidence interval for R. I could even ask you to go to that website and figure out what the confidence interval is. And then finally, I could ask you to write the result for some survey, for some data. I could also give you a short written report and say, what are the problems? What's missing? I like that what's missing piece. So remember that for a lot of different scenarios where I might I could write a study objective and say, what's missing? I could write up the results and say, what's missing? All right, a lot of information thrown at you today. If you have questions, let me know. Send me an email. I still haven't gotten that Q&A forum posted, but I will get that up pretty soon. Thanks for sticking with me through all this, and I look forward to seeing you in the next class when we're going to talk about t-tests. Have a nice day.